it is the most amazing thing to see a gentleman who has been sitting potentially in a wheelchair the entire time, probably in the front row. And he's cordially clapped, or maybe not, throughout our performance. But to see him stand up, like trembling to be able to stand up and salute or stand at attention for his service song is just amazing. And like, we've gone into veterans homes and nursing homes, and I've gotten huge hugs and tears from people afterward that were like, I served in whatever situation and conflict, and you guys just brought it out for us. Like, just that connection. And our whole mission is honor, inspire, and connect.
Hello, welcome to the Flute 360 podcast, where we incorporate a panoramic view of flute-related topics. I am your host, Heidi K. Begay, and this is episode 117, Military Musicians with Senior Airman Claire Workinger. The Flute 360 podcast and JK Media Productions are teaming up to help you with your student and professional needs. I, Heidi, offer consultation work to both music students and professionals alike. If you are a student who needs help studying for graduate pre- and post-music exams, editing a research paper, interested in flute lessons, or needs help with job applications, I am here for you. Also, I have been currently working with ministries, music publication companies, and other music professionals to help them with their online projects. Whether you need creative or social media help, I would be thrilled to work with you. My husband, Eric, has been an audio and video engineer for over 10 years and owns the JK Media Productions company. If you are someone who takes or gives music lessons via the web and need help with equipment and or setup, feel free to reach out to Eric. Lastly, he is well skilled with audio and video edits for your next creative project. Please contact us today at HeidiKBegay.com and jkproductions.media so we can get started working towards your professional goals. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Hey, Claire.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Great, it's good to talk with you.
Yeah, especially through all of our Facebook messengers. It's nice to hear your voice.
Absolutely. I feel like I already know your voice from listening to your podcast.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, you're sweet. Thank you. So you liked the episode with Allison Wollam.
Yes, that was great. I'm glad I got a chance to hear it before speaking with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm even more glad that we have an Air Forceman or woman on the panel because the other four ladies are all in the U.S. Army Band.
Yes, I do offer a unique perspective as an airman and a former Marine, actually.
Yeah, I'm really stoked that different branches are getting represented.
Excellent. You're doing a really good job portraying the Premier Band and the Fleet Band and the Guard Band and then the various branches. I applaud you.
Oh, thank you. And you are the first Oboist on the Flute 360 podcast.
Woohoo!
Isn't that crazy?
It's awesome.
Yeah. Are there Obo podcasts out there?
Yeah. Most of them are advertising themselves on our Double Read Society pages and whatnot. So those are kind of the only ones I know about. And then some generic, music ones that I'll occasionally listen to.
Uh-huh. That's cool. So you're going to have to invite yourself on those shows.
One at a time.
You just tell them you're a seasoned podcaster now. And
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll be a shoe-in.
Right. There you go. Oh, shoot. So you currently reside in Illinois?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, cool. So for those who may not know you, could you please share yourself and who you are and your musical background?
Absolutely. I'm a Senior Airman Claire Workinger. I have a master's degree from University of North Texas, and I have been in the Air Force for about 9 months, and I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years, so I'm considered prior service. And I play oboe and have played oboe since I was in 4th grade.
Wow. Congrats. And you are finishing up your doctorate?
I am all but dissertation for the most part. I haven't actually taken that test for it because I don't want to pay for the dissertation credits.
Yeah.
But I've got all the work done for it. But I stopped when I joined the Marine Corps. It is a full-time job and I didn't really have enough to split my time.
Yeah.
So I was taking classes until I finished the coursework and then decided to pursue other things because it didn't seem valid to finish compared to how much the competition was to get the academic jobs, professorships that weren't just adjunct positions.
Yeah.
So when I lived in Quantico out by DC, they were adjunct college positions that I was able to take, which was great. And I loved doing it. I mean, it's supplemental to doing freelance musician work, but it's not a full-time job. And it didn't seem valid to continue academia without being able to know that I was going to get a job to pay for the student loan debt that I was incurring to continue the doctorate. So I stopped and joined the band and had a family. And it's actually been a brilliant career move for me. And I love it. And as much as I know I would love to be a professor and would love that shtick, I have the capability of picking it back up again, because when you're in the military, your time ticking away at that tenure that you have before you have to finish the degree, before the degree expires, actually does not tick. So I have the ability to go back and finish after I retire if I desire.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's literally my life story. What you just said about how, like, you know, is it financially possible for me to finish a degree that is expensive? And, you know, even after I graduate, am I going to have a job to pay off those student loans? I mean, it's a real issue right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
These past 2 years, you know, like graduating May of 18 with my DMA, and these past 2 years have been part-time here and there, adjunct work. And like you said, it's not a full-time job. And it's very frustrating because you're like, I did not sign up for this. I did not like break my back for a terminal degree to work adjunct and to get paid $800 a month.
Yeah. And no health insurance and no retirement and no job security. And you end up having to depend on others, whether that's a spouse or a family member or friend or whatever, roommates, in order to make your life happen. And that's not the life that I want to lead right now. So
yeah, I don't blame you.
Choosing to not. And that's what the military band actually has served me very, very well.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that my life kind of opened up that possibility of me looking into military bands just for a brief moment. And that's how I got to meet you. And you were so kind to open up and share with me your experiences so that way I could gather the facts and decide, you know, is this the right career path for me? But there is so many perks to looking into this career field in that it's stable. You have, you know, health insurance, you get to play your instrument. And funny thing is, I felt like such a silly person because here I'm at 34 and thinking, why have I never been given this as an option? Like, I don't ever remember somebody telling me, hey, look at this military band possibility. It's a really great career move. I wish I would have maybe seen this as a possibility earlier in my career. And I would have loved to have kept pursuing, you know, auditions for these bands and stuff. But luckily, I finally got a full-time job that was presented to myself recently. So I ended up making, you know, a pivot. But the wonderful women such as yourself coming into my life and giving me these facts, because if I had not kind of pursued this possibility that I thought, oh, you know, can this be something? I wouldn't have considered other options. I was limiting myself before is what I'm trying to say.
Sure. And good for you for pursuing what is possibly, hopefully, of course, best in your interest.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you change your mind, you've got till 40 to join the Airman bands. So Air Force bands, I can talk Air Force bands. So, you know, if your contract expires and you decide that wasn't the right move for you, we would always take you over here, I'm sure.
Oh, that's true.
I know people who have done it, who have gotten into the Air Force bands at 39 years and 364 days.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
But no, there's so many wonderful things about this career, and I can't wait to pick your brain so you can share with us all the, you know, the neat perks and everything that you benefit, you know, from choosing this career. Okay, so you're in Illinois. You're playing in the concert band of the Midwest Winds.
The concert band is our main band. It's called Band of Mid-America.
Okay.
That encompasses nearly everyone in our band. And then Midwest Winds is our woodwind quintet. And that obviously is just 5 people. At the moment, we have added a percussionist. It is an interesting little perk for me. I've never played with woodwind quintet and percussion, but it's been super fun because he has opened up a whole different realm of music for us. And that means things like, the Ars Tropicalis, really standard repertoire, but with some percussion toys, or things like Log Cabin Blues that he can solo on marimba. And then we just arranged a little woodwind quintet to go behind him. And it's great. And we can do some marches and some intros. We did some jazz stuff. There's a great Agrell arrangement of Take 5 with bass clarinet and English horn and percussion, and then the other standard woodwind quintet instruments. And it's just been so much fun to have that colleague in that ensemble with us as we tour. Not to mention he's a wonderful person. So I'm in 2 ensembles, the concert band and then the woodwind quintet.
Okay, so you mentioned that you were first a Marine. What made you decide to audition for the Marine bands? Because then I think that story lends itself into you going and being an Air Forceman, correct?
Sure. So I was freelancing in Texas and was in so many little orchestras that played once a month or once every other month that paid a couple $100 here and there, and teaching as many kids as I could. I had up to 63 students and was making almost all of them oboe reeds and was driving all over creation. And it was really fun, but grueling. Yeah. And my husband was doing the same thing. And when we decided that we were going to have a child, it just wasn't feasible to continue that lifestyle, especially without health insurance.
Yeah.
So we decided that we were just going to start looking for jobs, anything that stuck. I'd auditioned for the Air Force bands a couple of times before. When I was at UNT, we all had shot for the moon to land among the stars with the premier band jobs. Those are always the coveted jobs. You enter as that higher grade, higher pay, and it's more prestigious. But I had taken a couple of those auditions because for oboe, they just don't come open that often, although I imagine the same is for flute. But I'd taken a couple of those auditions and gotten first runner-up or not. And so I was discouraged, but really wanted a job and would have loved one of those jobs. And the Air Force jobs, from what I understood, were very, very similar in caliber. So the people that generally are in the Air Force bands have quite a bit of pedigree as far as education and experience goes. They are not necessarily young. There are exceptions. And usually the people that are younger have just blown away the panel for the audition. And they're usually singers. But, in order to master how to perform such a difficult instrument and make its read, it takes years. And so generally high school students or straight out of high school students or even maybe straight out of undergrad aren't necessarily going to be as proficient as necessary for the Air Force bands and premier bands. And so I had taken a few Air Force bands auditions and gotten first runner-up actually a handful of times and been invited to some premier band auditions without having to do the preliminary rounds based on my being first runner-up from prior auditions and whatnot. And the timing just didn't sit for when I wanted to have a child and needing health insurance and needing life to just settle down and stop being freelancing. And so I was in a TMEA setting. It was a Music Educators Association setting, and all the vendors were around, and I met a vendor for the Marine Corps bands. And he said, well, if you don't win this Air Force band job, and I ended up being snowed out and unable to get to the audition at all. So that was fun. He's like, here, give me a call. And so I did. And they were willing to kind of bend over backwards for both my husband and myself to go in at the same time with, we got to pick our bass, because if you get a certain score on your audition for the Marine bands, you can select what bass you want to go to. They didn't have a trumpet spot open for him. So they just kind of made sure there was one available by the time we would get out of boot camp and kind of pushed us into the directions that we were hoping to go. Because I had been first runner-up for some of those premier bands. So I had asked, can I move over into the premier bands if there's an audition open and I win it? And my husband wanted to go to American University. So we headed out to Quantico. We chose to go to Quantico. And I loved living in the DC region. It was wonderful. And I loved being able to have a steady paycheck. And I loved being able to have health insurance and that kind of thing. My husband got to play trumpet all the time, which was great. Marine bands did not play as well for me as I'm experiencing in the Air Force bands for oboe, because they focus a lot on marching band, which of course is not really oboe. So I played some flute and piccolo, and I'm okay at the flute. So I did some of that and a lot of admin work. I know that Allison talked about how you have your primary job, which is musician, and your secondary job, which is running the band, which means transpo and supply and finance and admin, all the paperwork and just operations, making sure things run, and other things I'm forgetting, public affairs, media stuff. And so I was kind of in admin, running the shop, running the band, making sure things worked. So I felt like more of a secretary than a musician at that band, at that unit. So everyone's going to be different with a different commander and whatnot. But at that time, with that commander in that unit, I did a lot of admin stuff. So I freelanced a lot in DC as much as I could. I didn't find it as plentiful as Texas, so I missed that a lot. And decided after 4 years, I would love to continue to be a military musician. And at that time, it just so happened that an Air Force band oboe audition opened. I took it and I won it. And it just was stars aligned. And I was so blessed, so thankful for all of that to come together right at that time. I won the audition 4 months before exiting the Marine Corps.
Wow.
Yeah, it was perfect.
That was perfect timing.
Yep.
I don't think you could have planned that better.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. I was so lucky. Like, those auditions just don't come open often enough. And there it was. And I nabbed it. And I'm loving my new job. Absolutely loving it.
Wow. I can hear it in your voice.
Yeah. We go on tour about 1 week a month, sometimes 1 week every 6 weeks or so, whether that's with the concert band, which goes on tour 2 to 3 times a year, or the Midwest Winds Woodwind Quintet, which goes, every couple months.
Okay.
So.
Cool. So let's talk about that audition. What was it like? Was there a recruiter there? Maybe that doesn't even apply to you because you were, how did you say it, past served or past service?
Yes, prior service.
Prior service, thanks.
So what that meant is that I didn't go through Air Force boot camp, but don't worry, I went through Marine Corps boot camp.
Oh, because that's easy.
Air Force boot camp is 8.5 weeks. And right now with the coronavirus, they've narrowed it down to 6 weeks. I'm not sure if they're shipping people right now, but they are taking precautions and whatnot, being really careful with that. But it is 8.5 weeks typically with every musician, no matter what instrument you play, and a bunch of other people that are not going to be future bandsmen. They are put into a band at boot camp. Like, how cool is that?
Oh, wow.
I didn't go, so I'm sad.
Wow, that's unique.
Yeah. So I think my oboe colleague played trumpet or cymbals or something silly because they don't have woodwinds in their marching band. And that marching band has their own squad that, oh my gosh, I can't believe I can't think of what it would be called. I guess it would be wing. Sorry, my boot camp brain is Marine Corps oriented, so I'm my terminology. But they have their own group that trains together. Okay. And it's both male and women, and they separate the gender by, sleeping quarters and whatnot, but they train during the day together. And part of their training is being in this marching band. And from what I hear, granted, it didn't go through it, but I think this sounds awesome. They're just not as mean as everyone else's boot camp. So your drill sergeants, or in this case, it's called technical MTIs. So what are they? It's your technical instructor. Okay. And so they're still mean, they still get in your face and yell at you and instill the discipline that the military requires. Okay. But they are aware that you have enough discipline in you to be a musician. Even if you're not going to be a future bandsman, you have enough to have probably pursued music throughout high school. Okay. If you have the competency to pick up some kind of instrument and sort of play through it. Yeah. So this group of people get together and play music through boot camp. And I'm just like, I can't believe I didn't get to do that.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing setup.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and they're in Disneyland, or maybe it's Disney World. I think it's Disneyland, that they have brand new buildings that they sleep in and train in. And part of San Antonio's base, which is where boot camp is for airmen. So part of it is refurbished into these beautiful buildings. And so they call it Disneyland because it's so shiny and new.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was down there for my prior service training, which was only a week long, and watched the kids, if you will, watch the little recruits, although they're called trainees. So I watched the trainees come out and do their thing in Disneyland. It was cute.
That's cool.
Going back through boot camp because Marine Corps boot camp was really, really tough. 13.5 weeks of boot camp and then 4 weeks of combat training after that.
Wow.
Yep. So we were away from our stick for that long. There was a 1 week gap in between the 13.5 weeks and the 4 weeks. And then you went back to the School of Music that Allison talked about. Mm-hmm. We all went to that same School of Music, same building. We didn't train with the Army, but it was in the same building. And as she mentioned, you play for the first time, in my case, for 6 months, or not quite 6 months, right? And you play that instrument for the first time, and within a day or 3, you have to do a test, and they rate you on this test, and then you start training from there, and they, push you through. This goes for Navy and Marines. They're on the other side of the Army school. So the 3 branches there, Navy, Marine, and Army, they go through this Navy School of Music, or I don't know, Army School of Music.
Yeah.
Marines and the Navy are kind of co-mingling, as far as the Marines are a department of the Navy.
Okay.
Navy's boot camp is shorter. I think it's 8 or 8.5 weeks as well. So it's not nearly as long. And Navy also tends to recruit people that are a little bit more experienced and educated than the Marines, and sometimes the Army does. So it's just a different kind of world there. They try to shove what would kind of be an undergrad of music into about 6 months. And for some people that are straight out of high school, this is a lot of material to learn in 6 months. My husband and I, that were coming off having a master's in music, we found it a wonderful time to recoup our chops, since we had been in boot camp for 6 months.
Yeah.
So it was still good to go to the school in that respect, where we were not just thrown right onto the job and then, well, better learn how to play.
Yeah.
So I think that might be part of why the Navy School of Music is not a requirement for airmen at all. There is no school of music. You go to boot camp, and there's no technical training. All other jobs in the Air Force, as far as I know, have a technical training after boot camp, and then that can last for 2 months to 2 years. And then you go, or maybe 1 month, I think it's 1 month to 2 years. And then you go to your job. In the band, you just go to your job. They're understanding. They certainly don't expect you to jump right in your first day and play in their concert band tour that may or may not be departing that week.
Yeah.
But you don't have to go to that school, because they audition people right out of the cream of the crop. So they advertise in the Union magazine and on musicalchairs.info, and they really recruit great orchestral players.
Wow. Thanks for sharing all of that. That's neat that it's in the same building.
Oh, the Army and the Navy and the Marine Corps School of Music. It is in the same building, yeah.
That is so neat.
Yeah.
Huh.
Little Creek, Virginia.
So if you're okay with commenting on this question, what was the most memorable? I'm using that word very loosely, because I know boot camp is memorable, but what was like the highlight of boot camp, or what was the low point? Would you mind sharing that?
Oh man, I've never thought about it in those terms before. So Marine drill instructors, they're really cruel. So there was 100 girls in my platoon. It started at 115. Within the first week, we lost 15, because you take an initial PT test, and if you don't pass that physical training requirement, then they kick you out. And they don't eliminate you from boot camp. They just send you to the next week. So they give you a week to go work out with drill instructors. Have fun with that. But they don't let you go on to training, to the boot camp training.
Okay.
And so we lost like 15 girls or something that first week.
Wow.
And yeah. And the requirements physically for the Marine Corps is actually really, really vigorous. And I think that's part of why they hire younger musicians, because the demands and physical vigors are challenging. And it's hard to age, if you will. You have to be really, really physically capable and not get injured. And the PT tests are different. It's not just one per year. Or not even the same test twice in a year. It is difficult tests. They're longer, harder. Yeah, they're tricky. And boot camp is longer, and a lot more of what is considered a military term of hurry up and wait. There's a lot of that. So, but I think that's military wide, as far as some things just take a longer process. But the fact that boot camp was extra long kind of put some salt into that wound, because about 8 to 10 weeks in, you're like, okay, I'm really done. Like, I feel like I've got my discipline. I'm on now. And there's still 3 or 4 or 5 weeks to go. So no.
Wow.
So it's a lot of sitting around, and some of that sitting around, I don't mean in a like hang out and sit around way.
Right.
Oh, well, that never happened ever.
Yeah.
First of all, we never had chairs ever. So if you were sitting, it was on the floor.
Okay.
I got some blisters after a hike one day, and I got to sit on my trunk for like an hour. It was unbelievable.
Oh, wow.
The trunk being where you store all of your clothes.
Oh, okay.
So for the most part, if you're sitting, you're on the floor. But I would say the worst was they got this is probably way too much information. I apologize to your listeners and yourself. They got us on a regular schedule so that we didn't interrupt training, which meant that we were all lining up at our 1 hour of free time to go to the bathroom at the same time.
Wow.
And the way they controlled our bodies and our food, everything was precise. And they, depending on who was sleeping with the recruits that night, they have a little quarter that has windows next to it. It's not like they sleep in the squad bay with the girls, but they have a window that they can see in, and they come out every 2 hours and check on us.
Oh.
So yeah. And we switch watch every night. Oh my gosh, it was so exhausting. Watch meaning fire watch for when you're looking out for the rifles, and also for suicide watch.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's known for that. Yeah. So girls lining up on your 1 free hour that they give you from 7 to 8 p.m. and then lights out are at 8 p.m. because lights on are at 4 a.m.
Okay.
So, but from 7 to 8 p.m. people just line up at the bathroom because depending on the drill instructor, only one person could go to the bathroom at a time.
Oh my goodness.
There was between 50 and 100 girls in my platoon, depending on what was going on. So we started with about 100, and through the first phase, we lost a person here or there to injuries or whatnot. And then there's 7 things that you had to pass in order to pass boot camp. And I'm sure this is different in the Air Force because they aren't as particular about the physical fitness. They definitely have their fitness tests. They definitely have those requirements, but they have a lot more knowledge requirements that impact things like promotion more so than the Marines do. All the branches are going to be similar in that all the branches have a physical requirement and all the branches have a intelligence requirement, intelligence of your own job, as well as for us an audition, as well as Air Force wide or core knowledge, that kind of thing. But I remember Allison mentioning that there was a really tall Jacob's ladder or something. And I remember a cargo net where each link of the cargo net was multiple feet wide. I don't recall exactly how much, but it took a lot of effort. I'm only 5'4", so it took a lot of effort for my short legs to reach from one rope rung to the next.
Okay.
And at the very top, you took your rifle and your Kevlar, which is your helmet, and your flak, which is your vest, bulletproof vest, and your pack up this cargo net, which was so high. I don't know the stats on how high. Yeah. And then the log at the top that held the net up was the size of a horse. And so you straddled it and you threw your pack down, but you had to keep your gear on you, and you had to keep a low profile because your body needs to be with the log so that you're not a sitting duck to be sniped from an enemy.
Okay.
So then you climb back down the other side of it. And we lost a girl to that for falling, and she broke her spine.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. So she actually graduated. It took her 6 months to heal, and she stayed in, it's called Parris Island, where girls go to boot camp for Marine Corps. And she stayed at Parris Island for 6 months until she healed. And then she went back to basic training. 13 and a half weeks. Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah. She got to pick up where she left off, but she had to go, long time. That's a good perseverance. She was hurt and really cared, really wanted it. So good for her for succeeding. So that was not the hardest for me. I didn't have any problems with that.
Okay.
I had problems with all the pull-ups. It was not a requirement at the time that I went that we had to do pull-ups. But all of our tasks that we had to do, because they train you like the boys. The Marines at the time had genders separate, but we had the same kind of tasks. And so you had to do this obstacle course and this endurance course and this confidence course and this rope thing and this, that, and the other. And I just didn't ever have the upper body strength to do it. And I could pass the PT test without any difficulty. It was just a different type of upper body strength that I hadn't trained for and didn't know I would be needing. So I struggled with that.
Yeah. Wow, that girl with the broken spine. I tell you what, if I broke my back in basic training, there is no way on God's green earth I'm going back to finish.
Seriously. It is interesting. They don't give you much of a choice. So they throw you in a recovery platoon.
Okay.
And then you recover. Like you don't do much. I don't know. I didn't join the recovery platoon, thank goodness. Yeah. But I think from what I understand, they make you pass a PT test. But instead of you're running on like a course, which might be compact dirt or a road for your 3-mile run, they make you run on the sand because you don't have to get a great time. You just have to get the correct time. Like you have to pass. You don't have to get an amazing time, but they want to make sure that you're capable. So that's like the extra obstacle. Like, oh no, I don't want to go to the recovery platoon because I don't want to run my 3 miles on the sand.
Oh no.
Yeah. So obviously she did it. She passed that. So otherwise, they give you 6 months to heal. And if you don't pass, then you go home.
Wow.
Yeah. So I would say that was some lows. The high for me, my husband went at the same time.
Okay.
So we figured out, it took us 6 or 7 weeks to figure out that we could go to Jewish services on Sundays and see each other, like physically see each other, not like hang out together.
Okay.
And so all these week after week, Sunday after Sunday, everybody was going to the Christian service. And your whole platoon, the first couple of weeks, you have to go together and you have to go to the Christian service. They won't let you kind of stay behind there. Everybody wants to go, because if you haven't had a come to Jesus moment in your life, you have it at boot camp, because it is that hard.
Wow.
And you just want to cry. I think half the girls cried the first night. It was not fun. And so everybody wants to go to church. Like, I didn't hear anybody complaining about going to church on that first Sunday.
Okay.
And we all went to church, and I never saw my husband because there was thousands of people there. Our week alone had 600 graduates in it. Almost all of them were men. That's why my platoon only had 100 girls. And so we finally figured out through his rack mate, which means the person that shares his bunk bed, that if you go to Jewish services, then there's only a handful of people there.
Oh, I see.
So it's not so hard to spot the other guy. In fact, there was maybe 8 people there. And I'm so lucky. I think it was week 7 when I finally saw him. The laymen, so you're familiar with the lay person in a church?
Yes.
So laymen for the Jewish temple, they are the people that run the service. And so it was just this gentleman who was there, helping Parris Island, supporting his troops. He wasn't a veteran or anything. He just had a love for troops, and he lived right there on Parris Island, which was beautiful. And he was gracious enough to come out and run our little service, as opposed to the chaplain ran the big Christian service. Mm. So he was there, and we did our service and whatnot. And I believe my husband and I sat like one person in front of the other, because they tried to keep the men and women separate. Mm. So we weren't in the same row. We weren't sitting next to each other or anything, but we were definitely close to each other for the first time. Oh. So this gentleman, we did the whole hour, however long service. And oh yes, we had challah and grape juice, which was the best food that we had. It was great.
Nice.
But at the end of our very first time seeing each other, we explained who we were to the layman. And he said, "Oh my gosh, why don't you guys go ahead and give each other a hug?" And he like shooed everyone else out the door, shut the door, and let us hug. And we hugged for like a minute, just like clinging to each other. My bald husband, because they shave you in boot camp, and my like half broken self, because I'm old and trying to get through it. Like, I'm trying so hard just to stay on, because I'm a solid decade older than everybody else. Yeah. And so I'm just holding on for dear life. And that was the highest moment for sure.
I'm going to cry, Claire. That is such a romantic story. And I can just imagine just like feeling that sense of relief, and seeing your best friend there and your spouse there, and being able to just embrace and have that moment of just, and being given that. That was very sweet and kind for that man to do that for you.
And I am so forever indebted to him. And of course, he's nameless, but I will never forget him. And every year on October 4th, we try to get some challah and celebrate our time as Jews.
Oh my goodness. How precious.
Because that's when we finally reunited in boot camp.
Oh, how sweet. Beautiful. You already talked about like your transition from the Marines to Air Force. So let's talk about Air Force, since you currently are employed through this branch. What does your schedule look like as an Air Forceman?
I'm so blessed right now to have a wonderful command. So no matter what branch, no matter what premier band or fleet band or guard band, whatever you're partaking in, everything is going to be different based on your command and your commander.
Okay.
So my commander is just sensational. He really cares about us as humans. He really cares about us as musicians. He really cares about our family. And we also have this beautiful tool, which I didn't have on the same level. It kind of existed, but it was different in the Marine Corps. And that's called the first sergeant. And it's a master sergeant, which is a high-ranking individual, enlisted individual, who basically takes care of us all. And we're all adults. We don't need somebody to take care of us. But what she does is do things like when we're on tour, she makes sure that everybody's already checked into the hotel, and that she hands us all our hotel room keys as we walk in the door. So that we don't have to go up to the desk and try to check in and try to find our roommates so that we can get our keys so that like it's just done. Little things like that. Now that we're not going in and into the office every day, she checks in with me every third day. So I imagine she has taken her list and split it into 3. This is my guess. I'm not sure, but she checks in with us all the time. And if we ever need anything ever, any time of day, she can be contacted. And it's just so nice to have somebody care like that deeply, really deeply, but also not put her fingers in your business. Like it's not intrusive. And our commander is just wonderful. So my day involves hours of rehearsal for whatever tour is coming up. And it's when I say hours in such a long vowel sound, I mean it in the good way of like, oh, I get to spend hours playing my horn and it's glorious. So, I arrive at work. I try to get there about 8:10, which gives me a moment to change into my uniform. And I'm so blessed because our commander allows us that extra time, which gives me time to put my son on the bus. So I don't have to pay for morning childcare and try to rush around in rush hour traffic and get everything situated for him. I'm just able to put him on the bus and then go to work.
Nice.
And it's great. So we aren't required to be at our desk until 8:30. And in the Marine Corps, we had what was called a morning muster. And I believe they possibly have this in the Army and maybe other units. And every morning, everyone stands up together and just is accountable for each other, make sure everybody's at work, make sure everybody's on time. And then they spread word of the day. Like, today we're doing this thing, whatever. Whereas in the Air Force, everything is done in smaller doses.
Okay.
So if I'm needed at a rehearsal, I'm told I'm needed at a rehearsal. If someone else is needed at a rehearsal, I don't have to know.
Oh.
And it's just so much more concise.
Okay.
It's not micromanaged the way that the Marines were.
Okay.
And both of them have their pros and cons. It's just one way of doing it versus the other. I just simply prefer living this lifestyle. And so I know where I need to be at the time that I need to be there. And it's great. So my rehearsals are 8:30 to lunchtime. So depending on what the rehearsal is, it'll often go over what might be 11:30. So upwards of noon, we have rehearsal and it's great. There's breaks when you need breaks, every hour and a half or so, we have 15 or 20 minute breaks to get a snack or whatever and change reeds. And it's just wonderful to be in rehearsal with truly amazing colleagues that really know what they're doing, know how to play their instruments. And it's just a glorious thing. And then we have lunch from 11:30 or 12 until we get back to work. And that's when I schedule my doctor's appointments if I need to, or my son's doctor's appointments if I need to, and just make sure that my life is in order. Military members have some accountability for doctors in that they have to go do annual things, annual checkups and whatnot, that civilians don't necessarily have to do unless they choose to. They should potentially as for healthcare purposes. But I mean, I never did because I didn't have healthcare. So why would I go do that?
Right.
And now it's like, oh, I'm going for my annual checkup for this, like dental or whatever, eyes and physical, whatever. And so, those kind of things are scheduled during lunchtime for me.
Okay.
I don't have to. I certainly have the capability of scheduling them in the afternoon. We don't schedule anything in the morning. That's when we rehearse.
Okay.
In the afternoon, then we run our shop. So I'm doing admin right now. I did admin in the Marine Corps as well. So it's a bit secretarial. I have a niche for it and I don't mind doing it at all. So it's not a big deal. The people that I'm working with are helpful and plentiful. We are undermanned in my current band. So some people have more work than others to do in their job. Like right now, our media has a lot to do because everything is moved to the social media platforms. And so they've thrown more people onto that shop so that more people are there running that stuff.
That makes sense.
Great. Yeah, it totally makes sense. And that's the beautiful thing about it. Like everything just makes sense. Like, oh, we need help here. Okay, boom. Some people, it's logical. Yeah, our commander is wonderful. The music he chooses is great. And my colleagues are great. I have already developed friendships in my brief time in being in that I think are going to be lifelong. And yeah, everyone is just happy to be at work for the most part. And even if they're not disgruntled.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of professionals who are like-minded.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And a few people that have some rank, so they've been around for a little while. A few of them have some experience being band directors, so they understand how to reach out to those people as well. So we have the privilege to tour for various reasons. And we just went on a tour in March, and our tour was for Music in Our Schools Month. And so we were able to make an agenda reaching out to schools. We went to Terre Haute, Indiana, and we went to every elementary school, I believe every single elementary school, and a few middle schools and 2 or 3 high schools and a college for a ROTC program there, our OTC program there.
Very cool.
And so we were able to explain what we do, but also to connect our beautiful faces with their beautiful faces, to make it's like the public relations, to make the community understand that the military is a good thing and that we are there for them. And then, especially at Christmas time, we have a really fun job of doing a Christmas concert where night after night after night in our local communities, which is beautiful, where we have generals and very high-ranking personnel come in, and they are able to speak to a civilian captive audience that otherwise would never show up to a general speech. Like, why would you, random person off the street, go see what a general is talking about? Not going to happen. So they can come to every community and thank them for letting Scott Air Force Base be in their community, because my community right now supports this huge air base, and that's a beautiful thing. And so, like, our generals get to come out and say whatever they want to say to the community and thank them for supporting the base through their community. And yeah, that's a really beautiful thing. Another thing that bands do, we have some diplomatic relations. Many times over, it has had some hostile tension between antagonistic groups where music is made and then some walls are broken down, and maybe a week later, or even possibly that day, some communication barriers that were previously there have relaxed and allow some negotiations to occur. And it's such a beautiful thing that music has that much power, and it really does. We have so many instances where that has occurred.
Oh, how neat.
Yep. And then another thing that I used to do in the Marine Band was tattoos, which is basically like a drum and bugle corps type of show, but it has the full marching band. And that's where I would play flute or piccolo. And we would do these glorious, huge, overblown performances that were amazing and over the top, just like drum and bugle corps stuff. Like, it's so cool. And all these different countries would come in. And so we, oh my gosh, Germany's show is so cool tonight, and South Korea's costumes are amazing, and did you hear this song? Like it, and we connect. We behind the scenes get to meet these other bandsmen, and then we also get to meet with thousands of people in the audience. And sometimes it plays some really diplomatic roles as well as public outreach. It plays some really cool roles for diplomacy, in that a couple years ago, my unit went to Finland, and that's not a NATO country. Okay. And so we had a bunch of NATO communities come together and like form a beautiful state, if you will, around Finland, and be like, we support you, Finland. Like, we are here diplomatically for you. And another thing that happens regularly is World War I had an anniversary a couple of years ago. And so like we went to France, and well, not my unit, but one of the Marine Band units went to France and did a whole World War I show at Normandy, like at these big historic events.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's some wonderful things that we get to do. And every time I play a concert, and at the end, we always play all of the hymns or songs for the various branches. So it is the most amazing thing to see a gentleman, typically gentleman, who has been sitting potentially in a wheelchair the entire time, probably in the front row. And he's cordially clapped, or maybe not, throughout our performance, but to see him stand up, like trembling to be able to stand up and salute or stand at attention for his service song, is just amazing. And like, we've gone into veterans homes and nursing homes, and I've gotten huge hugs and tears from people afterward that were like, I served in whatever situation and conflict, and you guys just brought it out for us. Like, just that connection. And our whole mission is honor, inspire, and connect.
Oh, you could not have said that any better. And it's just amazing just to hear what our musical instruments can do for us. It just sounds like this big international ticket for your life. I mean, you just talked about the South Korean costumes, and then the different, music from this culture and that nation. And I don't know, those relationships and the networking and the relationships that are being formed through these outlets. It just sounds amazing.
It really makes your job worthwhile.
Yeah.
Because musicians, I always felt like a battle between feeling so fulfilled and also allowing my audience to be fulfilled by my music. But I don't like that selfishness that it comes with. Like, oh man, those doctors always save lives. They're not selfish at all. But this gives that facet. And I don't think music is selfish, but it gives that facet where it's not selfish. It is clearly purposeful.
Mm. Yeah, and it's serving the community and the nation, and whatever nation that is.
Absolutely.
Oh, cool. And we know Americans to be typically very patriotic, but if you talk with anybody from their homeland, a Greek, they are very patriotic about Greece, and so I think that's just innate, and it's in us, and we have ties to our land. And especially if a family member has served in some capacity in the military branch or branches, then there's a sense of pride there.
Absolutely.
My grandfather served in the Vietnam War, and he obtained a Purple Heart, and he's passed away now for a while, but it lives and breathes within your family. It's something you just don't forget.
No, definitely not. You'll never forget that. And that Purple Heart is something tangible that you can pass down also. That's so cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just you talking about what brought that up was just you mentioning the veteran or standing, up from his wheelchair. I can clearly see my grandpa doing the same thing in like something similar with like school assemblies, and that song was played standing and saluting to that anthem.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, I love doing those shows. It's so touching.
Oh, so cool. So for the listener that's out there who's heard everything that you said from boot camp, basic training, your schedule, and they're thinking, oh my goodness, I have got to get my feet wet. I really want to dive into this career. What advice would you give to him or her?
Practice. I would say actually take every opportunity that you can to be able to play with other people. So whether that means that you're playing in a community band that other colleagues might not be at your musical level, take it, play it. If it's driving you crazy because intonation is sketchy, play a different instrument, try something you've never played before, and just take these opportunities to make connections and to make musical connections with both your colleagues and with your audience. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, just to grow yourself as a person and to grow yourself as a musician in general. I think there's nothing too low in terms of how good an ensemble has to be for me to play in. Okay. And I've played some really mediocre orchestras and bands in my life. And the moment of performance is glorious. Huh. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, it's always best, of course, if it's in tune in time.
Yeah.
But the fact that someone is being impacted and that, someone in the audience, of course, in theory, is being impacted, but just to be able to have that kind of experience. I played in an orchestra in DC that allowed me to play some real full symphony repertoire that I hadn't completely gotten my feet wet in prior. Not because I hadn't played in orchestras for years, because I certainly had, but because they went and played more symphonies. I feel like you could never play every symphony.
Right.
And so I just got to play more, and I loved doing it.
No, that's really good. As we're wrapping up this really amazing conversation, are there any last sentiments or shout outs that you'd like to make before we say our goodbyes?
I don't think so. I've enjoyed talking with you, and I hope that someone is inspired by all of these talks that you have. I'm grateful that you're taking the time to do this.
Oh, you're so kind. And I'm so grateful that all of you ladies and yourself, since I'm talking with you now, are willing to share your expertise and time so freely. And we thank you for your service, and thank you for all the many, countless hours and tasks that you do for our nation that we don't even know about. So thank you for that.
It's a lovely job. I highly recommend it.
Very cool. So we do a fun little segment at the end of the show called Picks. Do you have a pick for the listener today? Sure.
I pick that you all should practice some Alexander technique.
There you go. I love Alexander technique.
Yes. Yeah. So, yes, get a book. I like Missy Vineyard's book. Even though it's a little bit dry, it's very informative. And practice some Alexander technique.
Very cool. I've done some links of Alexander technique books in past episodes. I'd have to look again. I took an Alexander Technique course during my DMA at Tech, and it was the best semester of my life.
Yay!
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely better to work with a teacher. I forgot that, actually. I was going to mention that. I had a note of it and I forgot it. In the Air Force bands, they pay for you to take lessons to better yourself. And so that could include Alexander Technique lessons as well as, for me, oboe lessons. And that was a really wonderful surprise that I got when I moved over to this branch. In the Marine Band, I had the wonderful opportunity of studying with someone in the President's Own. The English hornist in the President's Own was gracious enough to work with me sometimes. And often we would just make reads together, but he always had wonderful insights. And when he listened to me play, he had marvelous critiques for me to be able to improve. And I just really appreciated him helping me in that way. And he was gracious enough to not charge me when I was in the Marine Band, because he was able to use that as a promotion bullet, if you will. He was able to, for his promotion, write down that he taught a Marine, like a Fleet Marine, someone younger ranked than him. And so that helped him, with that. And he helped me by letting me work with him. And it was really awesome to have that connection. So
what an amazing opportunity. Very cool.
Another perk of living at DC land.
Yeah. A lot of great incentives, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Sonia was saying that she loved the DC area.
I really enjoyed living there, except the traffic.
Okay. That's fair. Well, thank you so much, Claire, for your time, talent, and energy. And I'm so appreciative of your expertise and sharing your time with me and the listeners.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Today's sponsor is brought to you by J&K Productions. Did you know that not only are they a production company for podcasts, but they are a recording company for musicians? Any musical recording needs that you may have, J&K Productions can fulfill that need. They have all the necessary equipment and expertise to record your next flute recording for college or graduate auditions, competitions, summer festivals, or a flute album. J&K Productions can record any setup imaginable, from solo flute, small chamber, flute and piano, and much more. Consider J&K Productions for your next recording project. Contact them at jkproductions.media. Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast. For more information, please visit HeidiKBegay.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review in the iTunes store. Let's talk about flute.